Who do you think is the most dangerous nation state?
So North Korea is pretty vengeful. They get mad, they get annoyed, you get in their sights, it's bad. Iran is different, but they've got some good capabilities and they're really good at hiring cyber mercenaries. And we've got China. They are in our supply.
Nearly 1 in every 3 physical products made in the world today comes from China.
We just install them in our house and in our workplace every day. And then you have Russia. They do everything from, stealing stuff and taunting people with it to looking at things for economic espionage. They've targeted critical infrastructure as well. They also like to, kind of meddle in political affairs around the world. Oh, for the record, all these nation states deny that they do anything.
Of course. You can just look right down the barrel of the lens over here and
for
just
the
say
record,
that.
all of these governments say they don't do this.
Perfect.
That is Theresa Payton, former CIO for President George W. Bush and a global heavyweight in cybersecurity. She's an expert in AI, misinformation, social engineering, and in 2025, we should all be listening to her.
What people have to realize is just because you're using an encrypted app doesn't mean you're bulletproof. They have to get it right every single day, the technology and security teams. The criminals just got to get it right once.
Is there a cybersecurity mistake that I'm making every day?
Don't give out your real cell phone number. Your Uber, DoorDash, Lyft accounts should not be your real name. But the rule that I use, and I tell all of our clients to use, is
That's genuinely probably the best piece of cybersecurity advice that I have gotten since I started
You're
working here, so
welcome.
thank you for that.
What's up, guys? It's Daniel here from the SP team, and I just want to say thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the podcast. If you've watched Scammer Payback before, you know that we're all about fighting back against scammers and helping you all stay safe online. But with these podcasts, we want to dig a little deeper, give you guys some new information just in a slightly different format. We're going to be interviewing experts in cybersecurity, online safety, hacking, digital crime, to go beyond just scams, right? We want to show you all the bigger picture, how these cyber threats are evolving, how these criminals are thinking, but most importantly, how you can always stay one step ahead. So once again, thank you so much for tuning into the podcast, and let's jump into this conversation with Theresa Payton.
Theresa,
yes.
thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
For people who don't know you yet, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Well, my current role is I'm the CEO of Ruthless Solutions, which is a cybersecurity consulting services company. We help organizations, U.S. government, Fortune 100 companies, protect their assets proactively, reactively. But we also do a digital executive protection service where we take care of CEOs, board members, but also people who are in the public eye and they need to have an opportunity to have what they want private, and it impacts their physical safety as well, and what they want public. And so we help protect their digital footprints.
Why do you think it's important for people to listen to what we're going to have going on in this conversation and what you're going to be telling us about?
Sure. Well, first of all, I spent 16 years in the financial services industry. And when I left to go to the White House, I thought at that point I had kind of seen everything. And I realize now that every day I'm going to see something new. And I spent 2.5 years working for President George W. Bush and got exposed to things I had not seen in banking, the capabilities of nation states. But at that time, they were still very much focused on the defense industrial base. So if it wasn't a government agency they were going after, it was really looking at like defense contractors, maybe a little bit around the edges, around critical infrastructure, but certainly they weren't taking those skills and necessarily targeting individuals. That was sort of left up to the Eastern Europeans and the Nigerians and now here we are. And it's an all of the above answer to the multiple choice quiz. You have nation states dabbling in critical infrastructure, attacking companies, attacking individuals, also going after government. And it seems like some of these nation states who were trained by day by their country are moonlighting as criminals at night. And then you've got just sort of cyber criminal syndicates and then loosely affiliated people who are just really bad people. There's no humanity in them. They don't care what they're doing to the person at the other end of the line, whether it's a computer line, a smartphone, or a landline. And it's just a really difficult time. So I jumped at the chance when I heard you wanted to have a conversation. I thought if there's anything I can do to help people that listen to your podcast be safer or save somebody else from being a victim, I'm all for it.
Well, that's kind of what we do around here. Our content is created in mind with, making sure that we are educating people, but also doing it in a way that's entertaining so that, kind of anybody can watch it and learn something from it. We're obviously going to talk about a lot of stuff, including your book, Manipulated, which I read and enjoyed very much. And we'll get into some of the more nitty-gritty stuff in here later. But I do want to ask you, at the very, very opening of the book, you say that some people might call you a conspiracy theorist. Is that a label that you lean into or something that you push back on?
So, there's kind of two sayings that I say to people, like, you might call me a conspiracy theorist, or you might say I'm paranoid. And I often then say, but it's only paranoid if it's not true. And so what I do know is that I will be an open mind and an open book when somebody says to me, have you heard? And I always say, tell me more. So I'm always open to an alternate point of view. It doesn't mean I believe it right away, but I'm a conspiracy theorist from the standpoint of, I think all options can be on the table, and I will do my research, I will do my homework, and I will make up my mind on my own. So in that case, some people might call me a conspiracy theorist because I won't just go along with what conventional wisdom says we should all be doing. Especially if somebody says we should all be thinking this way, I always want to question why. So that kind of gives me that label of you must be a conspiracy theorist. But I just say I like to be an independent thinker.
I like that. Well, we'll get into a little bit more about this later, but I want to start with your experience at the White House, because that is one of the first things that I learned about you. You were the first female White House Chief Information Officer back in 2006 under George W. Bush. What does the White House CIO do, and why is it so critical to our national security?
Sure. And every president gets to decide what these roles do, which is nice. They get to kind of craft the role the way they see fit. And the way it was defined for me when I got there, and it expanded during my 2.5 years that I was there, was we need you to extend the White House office to wherever the executive office of the president's staff happen to be, including the president, in the world, as if they were back at their desks. So you need to really support the mission and the operations. And so that includes everything as sort of mundane and perhaps, plebeian as we need to know how many chicken breasts we have in the usher's office refrigerator. But that's actually quite important, because you certainly wouldn't want to run out of food and have the Queen of England, coming to visit, which she did. She did visit the White House. Everything to the White House photography office, which he was the first 100% digital photography president that was switching over. It was still film when Clinton was president and had been switching over. So there's a big responsibility there, sort of in that back office setting, if you will. But then they traveled. And so you have the president, the vice president, the first lady's office, and then there's 13 components that make the executive office of the president. And then you may have cabinet members traveling on behalf of the White House administration. And when they do, the technology on Air Force One, we had responsibility for undisclosed locations, all of those international trips. You would have kind of different components to it. So my team was one component, but then we also worked very closely with Secret Service and then the White House Communications Agency. So you have to kind of bring all of those different groups together. I always say it takes lots of tribes to provide the technology support and operations for the executive office of the president. The other thing is there would be times prior to my tenure there where somebody on senior staff, could also be the president, would go to use a piece of technology and it didn't work. And so, of course, they would naturally turn to the first person next to them, and then they would try to explain that it wasn't their job. Yeah. And that is not okay.
No.
And so I established a technology working group there where we all talked about how do we create seamless, elegant service around everybody who works here so that we can all be empowered to at least say, let me help you, let me understand your question, and then do a warm handoff to the group that's actually responsible for it. So a lot of work went into that. And thankfully, I had tons of support from senior staff on all the things that needed to happen.
Now, you weren't working in government before that, though. You were
No.
in banking, right? So
Yeah, financial services.
can you walk me through the moment that you were approached to work at the White House? I heard you once say that you thought it was a scam, that they were
I
pranking
did.
you.
I did. So I had come back from maternity leave way too early. And with my second, I've got 3 kids. And I very tired, very sleep deprived. And I still remember Mary said, there's some phone calls that you need to return. And she was going to patch me through. And I was like, I don't believe this. And she said, well, they knew a lot about you. And I said, well, that's a social engineering scam. And you have to remember, this is before LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, like, my job in banking was, I would describe it as you go from the server room to the boardroom. There was no talking to the media. So I didn't really have an out in front kind of role. I certainly, being pregnant, did not work on anybody's political campaign.
Yeah.
So I wasn't going to be known to anybody. And I really was taken aback. So I almost didn't return the phone call. But when I did, it was funny because I connected with Bridget Sheedy. She's now Bridget O'Connor and actually works in my firm. I connected with her and her boss, John Straub. And if you think about, like, how in the world did they find me? So there were a couple different people doing a search, and Bridget just had dug really deep and came across my name. And then 2 other people who had contacted, like, business executives in tech, they had my name on a list. So these lists came together, and I was one of many people that they did call. And then some of us actually went through the vetting process and the interview process, and then they eventually offered me the job.
And that was from 2006 to 2008.
Yes, yeah. But the first phone call was 2005.
Wow, so that's a long process. I mean, I guess if you're working that closely with the White House, they probably want to make sure that they know exactly who they're getting.
Yes.
That was an interesting time for the country, to say the least. I mean, we're only a few years into Operation Iraqi Freedom at that point.
Yes.
I mean, it's still 9/11 still very much fresh in the minds of everybody. What was something post 9/11 that changed the way the government thought about cybersecurity and security in general?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, they had been thinking about cybersecurity issues prior to my arrival. And thankfully, the Bush administration had really thought long and hard about retiring old, antiquated technology. So when I got there, a lot of that work had been done, but really upgrading things for the future, that had not been done yet. So for example, they had standardized on BlackBerry, which really was a superior product. It's such a bummer that it's
That is basically gone now, right?
yeah, they're now sort of a cybersecurity software product company now. But yeah, the idea of, now I had that keyboard memorized. I could respond.
You're not even looking at it.
I wouldn't even have to look at it. I could do it just by feel, in the dark or under a table by feel. And that's kind of a bummer. But they had standardized on a few things. But for example, they did not actually have a 24/7 dedicated security operations center only dedicated to White House operations. So they had the National Security Council, they had the ExecSec, they had all these different groups who kind of looked at pieces and parts, but they didn't really have a dedicated team, a dedicated build out. And it was something that really needed to be strategically put together. But thankfully, I was able to get all the support I needed once I identified, if we really want to have the White House of the future, we need updated technology. We need updated thinking around how to integrate that technology as new things become available. And we need our own dedicated security operations center. We can't be borrowing from Secret Service and National Security Council and White House Military Office. We need to have our own. And we were able to get that stood up, which is not easy to do. There's not a lot of space there.
I can't imagine that there's much room left. I mean, it's so packed with people already. Where else are you going to put more people?
My team joked with me. They're like, ma'am, you can't really call it a security operations center when you have to move a table out of the way to open the door. So we called it the SOC, the Security Operations Closet.
Oh, now that's good. I imagine that has expanded beyond a closet now.
Yes.
Because, I mean, with the way that tech has advanced over the last 15, 20 years, you're going to need more than a closet to protect the president of the United States. What's something totally normal that people do with tech that the president could never do without endangering the entire country?
Sure. I mean, just using an off-the-shelf phone would be dangerous.
Yeah.
Because it's a homing beacon. You know, when I was there, the thing I had to worry about the most was, it's kind of cute. President George W. Bush is such an amazing person, but he loved his iPod Shuffle.
Yeah.
Loved to use it. You know, I don't know if he used it when he was chainsawing. I was never around him when he was chainsawing on the ranch, but I know he loved updating his music playlist. And one of kind of my to-dos was to make sure that when he updated it, that it didn't actually accidentally flip over to updating to the public cloud where you could see everybody else's playlists.
Oh.
Because you have to keep so much of that private because it's all pieces of a puzzle that nation states or terrorists would want to have as part of a plan. So you have everything from the president's favorite toothpaste to his iPod music playlist, all of those things. You have to keep it so tight and so close. So I would say, you know, just using off the shelf anything. You know, he loved WeatherBug, which I still use today. It's a weather app.
I was going to say, yeah.
It gives you alerts and things like that. Well, we had to run that app through the paces first before we could make it available on his desktop for him. So it's things like that you just have to think long and hard about and do I've actually changed my mind. I always loved Reagan saying about trust but verify, but given where we are with criminals, nation states, and the state of technology, and the fact that it's not secure by design, I've been saying to everybody, verify and never trust. That's like kind of my new motto.
What did President Bush's phone look like at that time? How locked down was it?
He did not use a mobile phone. We prototyped over and over again the BlackBerry.
Yeah.
And I could never, myself and a few others could never get comfortable enough with the technology to make it viable for him in a way that it was portable, seamless, and easy to use. And that finally happened towards the end of the presidency. But at that point, he said, I went this long without it. I don't need to have it. And so we were ready when President Obama was elected because we had been prototyping for over a year of if we were to give the president a phone to carry around, what would it be? How would it behave? How would we make sure that we weren't putting a homing beacon in his pocket that somebody could track? And by the time we finally got comfortable, he was like, it's okay. We'll be ready for the next group. He was always thinking about making sure that we left things better than we found them for the next group. And he would say, this isn't about just finishing strong and a good transition. This is about how do we lay the foundation so no matter what's becoming plug and play, there's a framework there that it will stand the test of time, that is sustainable.
I was going to say, you know, obviously Obama then had a phone, and then President Trump, and then Biden, and now I assume Trump again. That leap in technology was, I'm sure, huge from 2008 even to 2009 when Obama took office. But now technology has continued to change so much. How has the White House been able to stay up to date on all of this tech without endangering the most powerful man in the world?
That is up to each individual administration. And I just say, I'm praying for you and good luck. And you know how to reach me if you need advice. And so I've always offered to each administration to be a sounding board because it's pretty lonely. There's very few people who have been in these roles. And there's a lot of really qualified, great government employees. You'll probably never know their names or even see their faces. And that's the thing, they stick around, so they're not politically appointed, and they do great work. And I know a lot of them are still there from my time there.
Who do you think is more prepared for a hack? The White House or a big tech company in Silicon Valley?
I think it depends on who's targeting you. And I would also say, if there's anybody who says, I'm better prepared than everybody else, that's a lot of hubris.
Yeah.
That is a lot of hubris because, you know what, there's kind of a couple of things that come together as to why some firms get successfully attacked. Everybody's being targeted every day. And there's a lot of preparation, but there is some luck involved, I just have to say. Like there's just some luck involved. Like when you see firms that just happen to have a person kind of look over their right shoulder and go, what is that on that screen? I'm just going to take a closer look at that. And that firm dodges a bullet. Whereas another firm, same scenario, but it happened at 2 a.m. and nobody was looking at the screen.
Mm-hmm.
It is such a challenging time. And I always say to people, when you read about an attack, whether it's on a government agency or a private firm, they have to get it right every single day, the technology and security teams. The criminals just got to get it right once.
Yeah, they get to play the numbers game.
The numbers are in their favor. Everything's in their favor.
Yeah.
First of all, we publicly announce when we've got vulnerabilities. Like we used to actually have a patch day for certain vendors. So it's publicly announced when we've got vulnerabilities. They have access to that. It's publicly announced what's going on with companies, with government agencies, with layoffs. All those things are publicly announced. And those are all pieces of the puzzle to say, okay, what's my gig going to be today? How am I going to target this firm today? They just got to get one. Once they get one, they just keep working on it. And so it's a lot of preparation, but it's also a lot of luck.
How do you find the balance between being open with the public and giving out that information that is important, and also protecting yourself, covering your ass a little bit from these criminals?
Oh, no, I totally agree. So to me, public disclosure can be a good thing because it can teach everybody else, okay, this is how they got in. But I actually was not a proponent of sort of for like publicly traded companies that you have to file with the SEC that you've encountered a breach within X amount of days, because I've been on the front lines of an incident response. You don't know anything. All you know is we're under attack. You don't know a whole lot else. Half the time, if you're asking for outside help, they don't even show up for days. So I think it's tough because you're announcing to the world before you even know what's going on and have fixed the issue. I'm vulnerable. I'm weak. I'm actually under attack, and it's still ongoing. I mean, it would sort of be like announcing in the moment, hey, we're under assault for a bank robbery right now. The vault's open and we're handing out cash. Why would you tell all the other criminals in the area the vault's open right now? And a lot of times, given the time frame that companies have to file their disclosures, which are public disclosures, remediation's not done.
Yeah.
So I'm a fan of having to share, but I don't feel like we're giving companies enough time to really understand what they're dealing with. And we're sharing and disclosing things publicly before everything maybe is remedied. That's hard. So I feel like there's got to be a different way and a better way. And there's a lot of bright minds in technology. And I think if we put our heads to it, we could figure it out.
I heard this quote. I'm not sure who to attribute it to, but they said there's two types of American companies. Ones that have been hacked by China and ones that don't know they have been hacked by China yet. Who do you think is the most...
I remember Director Mueller saying that quite a few years ago. So that might be attributable to him. But I bet you a lot of people have
probably
said it.
goes back pretty far, given just how much hacking has occurred over the last 20 years. Who do you think is the most dangerous nation state with regard to hacking right now?
Again, I would say it depends on what it is. So North Korea is pretty vengeful. Look at Sony.
Oh yeah, that was huge.
Devastating. So North Korea is pretty vengeful. So they get mad, they get annoyed, you get in their sites. It's bad. It's really bad. And they've got really great capabilities around stealing cryptocurrency as well. So they're frightening. Iran is different because Iran has sort of theocratic geopolitical ambitions that are hard, and they've got strange alliances, but they've got some good capabilities, and they're really good at hiring cyber mercenaries. So they have their own capabilities, but they also don't mind outsourcing. And then you have Russia, and Russia has evolved their thinking over time. So they do everything from taunting people, stealing stuff and taunting people with it, to looking at things for economic espionage to understand who's friends with who and can I get a leg up. And they've targeted critical infrastructure as well. They like to steal cryptocurrency. They also like to, kind of meddle in political affairs around the world. And I think what's interesting about Russia is their propaganda, and I talk about it and manipulate it, they perfect it on their own people first because they want to mind control their own country. And then they take the techniques that seem to work and then they propagate those techniques and test them out, across the world, especially in democracies, because they want to show that their version of how they run a government is really the best. And you don't want to be like them. So there's a lot of the mind control that goes on of their own citizens. And then there's the pride in Russia. And then there's the targeting our critical infrastructure, but also meddling in sort of democratic elections. Then we've got China. And China's a tough one because, for the record, all these nation states deny that they do anything.
Of course, yeah.
So just for the record, we have to say that.
Just say it.
Just a disclaimer. Because I don't want somebody saying, this former White House CIO said they do all this stuff. And it's like, for the record, all these governments say they don't do this.
You can just look right down the barrel of the lens over here and
for
just
the
say
record,
that.
all of these governments say they don't do this.
Perfect.
And I always say, well, if you don't, because they'll use words like, I don't condone this. And I'll say, well, if you don't condone it, then you should condemn it and let me see people go to jail. Oh, I don't see you locking anybody up for what just happened to my country.
Yeah.
So clearly you have a hand in it. So with China, they are in our supply. So there's the hacking in, they started off hacking in and looking at, things that are sort of trade war and how can we get a leg up on negotiations and then who's friends with who and who's talking about us. And then they just kind of moved in and also creating counterfeit technologies.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a published program, the Belts and Roads Initiative, where they also recruit Chinese nationals and people who have moved to America and other countries to do things for the greater good of China. And people do that. I worked on one of the cases and he served jail time and he's now in China. But we came over to America, graduated through the university system, became a citizen, worked for multiple companies. And it's in, if people want to look it up, it might be on YouTube. It's called Made in Beijing that the FBI put together. And his case is in that YouTube video that we worked on, that my team and I worked on that case. So they've moved on and now they're just in our batteries and in our solar panels and in our, the things that we buy. So we just install them in our house and in our workplace every day. And we don't take this seriously enough. And we certainly need to.
We talked with Ryan Montgomery. He's an ethical hacker. And he told us the story about how he has a mop that was made in China. And obviously he ran some tests on it and he saw that it was connecting back to a server somewhere in China. Mm-hmm. And he was like, why does my mop need to connect to the internet at all? But it's these little oversights in security that we probably don't take seriously enough or maybe aren't even aware of as just Americans in the general public. Do you feel confident that the United States government is ready to defend us from a mass-scale cyber attack?
That's a tall order.
Yeah.
So what I would say is I do feel very confident in our preparedness. So we know what the issues are. They're hard to eradicate. Mm-hmm. But we have playbooks. The government and critical infrastructure practice worst case scenarios all the time. So when it happens, we'll be ready. But the idea that we could 100% stop something bad from happening, that's not possible.
As long as we're as prepared as we can be.
I believe we could do better being more prepared, but I believe that we take it very seriously. I've sat in on some of these tabletop exercises and it is so real and we are so serious that it actually says at the top of the exercise, exercise, because you could accidentally get in a mode and have people start to think this is real. because it is so realistic and we all take it so seriously. So a lot of times throughout the tabletop exercise, everybody says out loud, this is an exercise, 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 so that you don't have people accidentally running off and saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, half the East Coast is down. So, but we've also seen problems happen that have nothing to do with cyber. We have fragility in our overall infrastructure and supply chain anyhow, but the idea that a digital attack combined with something else would be really hard to sustain resiliency and reliability.
When you're sitting down for one of these tabletop exercises, what does the worst case scenario look like?
It can be anything from like the power's out, and because the power's out, the data centers are out. Because the data centers are out, comms are down, something like that. It could be anything, solar flares impacting satellites and communications. So it really varies depending on who you're getting together for the exercise. I've actually had a concern, and I've mentioned that we should do an exercise on this, but I haven't seen it done, which is my concern is that somebody would actually hack into the National Registry database for like the blood banks and actually switch blood types and then create a kinetic event where there would be a lot of casualties that would require surgeries and perhaps blood, and then it would actually create distrust in sort of the healthcare system while you're sustaining like some kind of a man-made significant incident or event. And I've said, these are the kinds of things, I'm not dreaming it up for somebody to try and copy it. I'm dreaming it up because you have to think about these worst case scenarios. I've often recommended we should get movie script writers to actually write the playbooks, because it's their creative minds that are going to think about the art of what's possible. Whereas people who are trained like me, we were brought up like, technology is ones and zeros at the bottom of it all. Everything is one big decision loop. If this, then this, and you don't want a computer program just looping on forever. So everything has eventually a neat little end, right? Or go back to the top, right? Or do a do loop, right? And so everything in technology, if you're classically trained in technology or even business models, a lot of things are based on what happened in the past and theoretically what could happen in the future. It's almost like we need white piece of paper, bring in the most creative minds, like it's Steven Spielberg and other people, and just say, what are some things that you think could happen, and have them write our playbooks.
That's it is two sides of the same coin, really, because hackers are so creative and they're always thinking of new ways to break into systems, and people that write films are so creative. They're always trying to come up with a new story, and in that way they're sort of working on the same thing. So I think that would be a really
Wouldn't that be
smart
amazing?
way to do it. I would kill to be in that room.
If
That'd be an
anybody from
incredible
the
room.
White House is listening, this needs to happen.
We'll get it up there. We'll run it up the flagpole with our federal contacts and all that, right?
Real quick, I want to jump in here and say thank you so much to AnyDesk for being the official sponsor of this podcast. Look, we've been working with the guys at AnyDesk for a while now, and they are really leading the way in the fight against scammers. In fact, by the time you're listening to this, we've just wrapped up People's Call Center 2025 with the AnyDesk team. And they've stepped up in a ton of other ways too, like helping out with scam victims, creating a tech coalition to go against all kinds of scams. Even just partnering with channels like us shows the world that AnyDesk means business. And if you work in the IT space or just need remote access software, you should definitely check them out. Their stuff is top notch, and they're always introducing brand new features to help boost your productivity. Once again, thank you so much to AnyDesk for sponsoring this podcast. Let's jump back into the conversation.
There's been a massive spotlight recently about how our top US officials are communicating with each other. Obviously, you have heard of the Signal scandal and all of that. And because of your experience working in the White House, I wanted to ask you, how is classified communication supposed to work at that level? In your mind, how would you want it to work if you had full control over it?
It's 2025. And if you want to look at classified information, you have to go to a windowless room and get on a computer that might be from the early 2000s. I'm not sure.
Lord.
And it's super clunky by design. That's it. That's all you have. We don't have mobile classified comms. So you can travel with a Faraday cage, you can travel with a skiff, but you still put people in that room. It's clunky. It's not real time. You cannot do real time classified comms typically. There's a lot that goes into something like that. So the question remains on if you want leading government officials, senior executives, to be able to be in communications real time, how would you like that to happen? So the White House, for their part, says, well, nothing here was classified. Classified information has no business on Signal, period, end stop. But I would venture to say, reading it, and I'm not a classifying authority.
Mhm.
I'm just a receiver, right? And in a role on a need to know basis. I read it and I thought, I don't know, this seems pretty. There's a categorization called sensitive but unclassified. So it's just like handle with care. So clearly, having people who are not employed by the government in these group chats is dereliction of duty. And when I read all about it, I thought, okay, everybody needs to be brought in for training. And because you have people make mistakes in a moment. I thought it was interesting though, because we used to actually load people's contacts for them.
Oh, just so there
On their
was definitely
smartphones.
nobody in there that they
Yeah.
shouldn't be talking to.
Right.
And that has just gone by the wayside, I guess?
I suppose. I mean, again, every group has to make the decisions that are best for them. And it could have just been like, look, we got to get people onboarded really quickly here. And this is how this is done. We're going to do it this way. It could be, they said Signal had been pre-approved by the Biden administration. So sometimes in the chaos, it is very chaotic during transition.
Oh, yeah.
You literally have a president swearing in. And while he's swearing in, the outgoing president, that team that's there, they're having to unplug computers, pull hard drives. Everything has to be that belongs to the previous administration has to be cataloged, inventoried, and handed off to the National Archives. And then you need fresh data, fresh systems, fresh drives, or whatever's decided with NARA so that each administration is cut off.
Yeah.
And it's all done on the same day. It's all done on the same day. It is amazing that it happens at all. It's just an amazing process, and people have no idea what's going on. You don't have White House technology staff watching the inauguration. They're working their buns off.
Yeah, I was going to say, everybody just sees what's going on TV, but behind the scenes, it's just chaos.
Because
I'm
once
sure.
the swearing in's done, a lot of the staffers are like, I want to get to work. Where's my laptop? And you're like, we're not ready for you, man. we're still unplugging the last administration. So it's a crazy time. So it's hard to know because it was so early on in the administration that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But my biggest piece of advice, I made a few phone calls to people and I said, if you have anybody's ear, I would pull everybody in for training. I would use this scenario. I would go back over everybody's acceptable usage statements, make everybody sign them again that they understand, and basically just say, okay, everybody, get with the program, get with the training, and move on out. Let's get back to work. And that's what you do. I mean, we would have people make mistakes from time to time at the White House. We would bring them in for training, and then we'd say, do you understand everything? And if you ever have questions in the moment, here's our 24/7 number. We pick up on the second ring. So I always told people that. Hopefully that message is getting through.
Do you think that situation sent the, no pun intended, wrong message about what Signal is and what their mission with privacy is? Because we use Signal in this office because obviously we talk about some stuff that maybe we don't necessarily want Google having a handle on. And I think that situation made a lot of people very nervous to use Signal. But it wasn't an internal flaw with the system, it was an external flaw. Somebody had access to the messages that shouldn't have, and then they released them.
Right.
And I feel like that set us back on a privacy conversation a little bit.
It did. And I mean, what people have to realize is just because you're using an encrypted app doesn't mean you're bulletproof and you're stealth and you're invisible. And so, for example, a lot of people like to sync their Signal messages to their desktop or their laptop. How safe is that device?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're offloading the messages and not doing disappearing, like all those different features and functions, there can be chinks in the armor. No encrypted app is 100% foolproof. I always tell people, you know what? Like the rule that I use in life and I tell all of our clients to use is you always, when you're doing something digitally, over the airwaves, typing something up, taking a picture of something, have two people looking over your shoulder. One's your grandma. And if you want your grandma to see, if you'd be embarrassed if she saw how you were talking about something or what you were doing, don't do it, because the internet never forgets. It never forgets. And then over the other shoulder is a really bad person. So the things that you're talking about, that you're writing about, if they got access to it, would lives be in danger? And if so, go analog. Digital is no place for that. That's just my take on it.
As we get further and further into the future and technology keeps evolving, do you think there's going to be a necessity for faster communication amongst our government officials, something that is as fast as signal but as secure as the way that we communicate classified information now?
Oh, we have to go there. I mean, it's 2025 and it's sad to me that we haven't figured this out yet. We have to do better. I mean, like we have things like satellite communications, satellite phones. There has to be another way that's seamless, elegant, and as simple as Signal, but more secure and something that the government creates and isn't relying on a third-party app on a third-party phone.
How high up on the priority list do you think that is? Right?
Probably low.
Really?
I'm just going to guess.
Yeah, if you had to guess, I guess it would
I had to
probably
guess
not be.
probably low, because I mean, there's other things going on.
There's a lot. There's a lot going on. Well, moving away from
we haven't even figured out the life for TikTok.
Oh.
It was banned, then it wasn't banned, and then you had a deadline, and now we've got an extended. So if we can't figure out what TikTok's going to do, I don't think we're going to get to this app anytime soon.
I actually wanted to talk to you about TikTok, so thank you for teeing that up. That's very nice of you. In your book, Manipulated, you talk about how countries and political regimes will block websites and ban apps in order to maintain control over the people that they want to manipulate. And reading that, it was really hard for me as an American to square it with the fact that we are on the precipice, and have been for so long now, of banning TikTok. Where is the line between banning TikTok in the name of national security and becoming like the countries that we criticize?
I think it's a great question. And I have so many unanswered questions about TikTok. So
I think we all do, right?
I heard the national security concerns, but then I also watched TikTok say, okay, we hear you. Under CFIUS, right? So the basically looking at foreign influence. And so they said, okay, we hear you. We're going to do project, I think it was called Project Texas. So they spent, I'm just going to guess as a former CIO, hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know the number, but I'm going to guess it's hundreds of millions of dollars with Oracle to separate US citizen data and only store it in Oracle in America. Was that not the task that we gave them?
Yeah.
And so is that not good enough? And is there a new national security risk? What is it? Is it, wow, that algorithm is so good and really popular, it puts Meta at risk? I got questions. I don't have answers. Because no one's told me they failed the CFIUS test.
Yeah.
No one's told me we did an inspection of Project Texas with the Oracle implementation and it's still not good enough. And here's why. Nobody's really said that. I've heard, well, if you really saw the report, and I'm like, well, I've seen everything publicly available. And yes, I've got concerns about the algorithms, but I have concerns about Meta's algorithms and Google's algorithms and other algorithms. So get in line. Like, do you want them at the front of the line, the back of the line? Like, just because their origin story is in Silicon Valley, it doesn't make them inherently evil. So I think everybody should continue to ask questions.
When the whole TikTok debate first started, one of the big points that I heard a lot of people on the side of banning TikTok say was, well, all they're trying to do is force a sale to an American company. And my counter to that was always, okay, well, look at Meta. I mean, we just had Sarah Wynne Williams, the whistleblower, testifying in front of Congress that Mark Zuckerberg and Meta have been working with the Chinese government. She literally said hand in glove. Would selling TikTok to an American company make it safer, or would it just make us feel safer?
Yeah, you have to wonder, are we window dressing here?
Yeah.
Are we really dealing with the technical issue? I think it's a very fair question to ask. And that's probably a job for the oversight committee. And we've heard before that Silicon Valley companies, Apple included, they definitely bend the knee when it comes to China.
Mm-hmm.
Because nobody wants to be, they've got FOMO as it relates to that market, fear of missing out. What am I going to do if I can't sell to that whole market? So what China says, we do. It's pretty, I mean, to me, I think it would be more impressive if Americans heard, China asked us to bend the knee and kiss the ring, and we said no. So we're not going to be selling there. We're going to take a hit on our profits. But we can't do business with a country that makes us do things that we disagree with.
We're not going to sacrifice people's privacy for a profit.
But they are.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think that, and I'm just going to ask you this as somebody that's very well versed in these manipulation campaigns, do you believe that the United States is more worried about the app itself or the influence that the content on the app can have on people?
Legitimately, I think it's a little bit of both. I think, one is, and this should be a concern for all social media, which is the addictive properties, the addictive nature. Is there enough governance of here are the topics that are being fed to a person? And is that creating a situation where they become depressed, despondent, lonely, withdraw, can be manipulated, mind controlled and manipulated? And so we don't really have, I would love to see that really thought about and talked about, but it just isn't. Mm-hmm. So there's one. So there's sort of the mind's manipulation piece of it. But then there's also, what is the true collection of data and who has access to that data? Because I will tell you, in investigations, so we do digital investigations as well. And if we can start to build a pattern of life that somebody has had, then I can sort of predict what they're going to do next. And many data scientists, smarter and better than me, can do that with technology. So if you have behavioral-based analytics on an individual, then you can start to predict probably better than they would recall themselves what they're going to do next. And so the question is does TikTok parent ByteDance, do they have access? So as the algorithm is feeding you more of what you came for, and you're engaging with it, all the different things that the algorithm might be collecting about you to continue to give you more of what you came for, who has access to that data? TikTok USA says it's on our Oracle system, so it's TikTok USA. There are people on the National Security Committee and the House Oversight that have said, I'm not sure I believe that. I think ByteDance still has access to data. Mm-hmm. So that's where that's got to come through. But I think all social media companies run the risk because they are collecting that information and they're not truly anonymizing it. And so there's a risk of either being hacked or selling the data to the wrong person, providing it to the wrong government.
What are some unexpected ways that our data might be used to track us? Mm-hmm. Things that the regular person wouldn't think about on a day-to-day basis.
Things as simple as you go from point A to point B, and point A and point B have been deemed by somebody, could be police records or whatever, as very risky. And so now because you go from point A to point B, maybe you're not going to get car insurance, or maybe it's going to cost more. There was a study done at one point where some of the travel sites were charging Apple users more than Windows users. So
Really?
They decided they had more discretionary income. So if you went from a Mac to go look at trip prices versus a Windows machine, you got two different sets of prices. So all of our digital tracks and our digital behaviors, because we don't have I've been saying for decades, we need a privacy bill of rights down at the individual level that says, I need to know what you collect on me. I need to know how you monetize that. I need to be opted out unless I opt in. And when I opt in, I want in on the action. So if you make 5 cents on me, I want 2 cents.
I can get behind that for sure.
We need a privacy bill of rights. We really do. That says the banks have to disclose when you fill out a loan application. We have to disclose to you on a regular basis that here's how we treat your data and that we'll never sell it to a third party. But if we do, here are the third parties that we would. And then here's the agreement with you. The banks have to do that. Now it's on like 8-point font, but we really have to do that.
Yeah.
And we couldn't make any changes to that without getting you to sign a new disclosure. Social media companies, they just make you sign a privacy statement. And I always tell people, if you want to know the privacy you do not have, it's in your privacy statement because it spells out all the privacy you don't have. But nobody reads it.
What is the easiest thing that I could do right now to shrink my digital footprint? And I realize it's ironic for me to ask that as I'm now hosting a podcast, doing this interview
Oh, I know,
with you
same for me. I'd
very
love to
publicly.
be. I worry about deepfakes too. And,
Yeah.
and I've been on the news and things like that. And it's like, well, what are you going to do? But there are some things you can do. So I always tell people, for starters, something simple. Don't give out your real cell phone number. Get a burner number, Google Voice, something like that. Use that because these are all identifiers. And every time there's a data breach, these identifiers get dumped and then they get correlated with third-party marketing data. So you can have these burner numbers, have burner emails. So have a certain email you use with your kid's school, your bank account, your healthcare. Don't use that with your coupons for Groupon or your DoorDash or other things. That's another thing, especially if you're a VIP, your Uber, DoorDash, Lyft accounts should not be your real name.
I'm just gonna look at the camera and say, my real name isn't Daniel. I feel like I have to come clean about that. It's not. No.
Even your mailing, like how you get things delivered and dropped off. If you're a VIP, we oftentimes recommend to people have a PO box for certain things that you have to use your legal given name. And then for everything else, you need to have an alternate persona. And that's the one that gets the packages and the DoorDash and the Ubers and all of that stuff, because you just don't want those patterns of life to end up in the wrong hands.
With all of that in mind, is there a cybersecurity mistake that I'm making every day that I'm not even thinking about?
Do you use multi-factor authentication?
On
every chance you get?
On most of my stuff, yes, I try to. That's like the baseline?
That's like the baseline, because multi-factor authentication will stop 90% of credential stuffing attacks. So if somebody sees your old password in a data dump and they use variations of it against you, multi-factor authentication will stop 90% of those attempts. There's hardly anything that stops 90% of attacks. So that's a really easy one. Free Wi-Fi. Even if you're in a really nice hotel, using free Wi-Fi is like picking up a toothbrush off the lobby floor and using it. You don't know the hygiene of the toothbrush, you don't know the hygiene of the free Wi-Fi.
Do you recommend people use a VPN?
Do your homework, do your research, because some of them are not honest brokers. Hotspots on your phone. That's a great way to get connected to the internet if you can't validate the hygiene of what you're using.
Kind of in the realm of making easy cybersecurity mistakes, tracking people, data. You took part in a TV show called Hunted, the British show that they then transplanted to America. For people that don't know what it is, they essentially have a group of security experts, bounty hunters, people that worked in intelligence, try and track down pairs of regular folks that are going on the run. I watched it because I was a fan of the British version of the show, so I watched the American version, and it was cool to see you in there doing your thing. What was it like taking your real life security skills, your OPSEC, to the entertainment world?
It's funny because at first it was a little hard to get used to. First of all, that command center, that's the fanciest command center I've ever worked in. I'm like,
it's not a closet for sure.
I'm like, first of all, you can tell this is totally Hollywood. It's clean. It's clean. There's no coffee stains on the desks. The chairs all work and they're not broken. And I've never had this much space in my life in a command center. But other than that, and then the other thing is we were mic'd the whole time.
Oh yeah.
Even when you thought you were off camera, I was wearing a hot mic underneath all my clothes all the time. So that was a little strange. But then once once we got through the dry run and everything, and you just forgot and you started just working like you were working an investigation. So you really started to forget the cameras were there and you just started to just do the job. And the job was finding these missing people.
What do TV shows and movies get wrong about going off the grid? Being completely disconnected from society and technology?
I mean, it's really almost impossible these days. And like, for example, they needed cash to go on the run. Well, there's an ATM and a camera. If you do hitchhiking and there's any cameras at all where they pick you up, now we've got that. Now there's license plate readers on almost every highway. I mean, it's really hard. Even if you don't walk around with an internet, Wi-Fi, satellite-enabled device, it's hard to be off the grid.
It was genuinely my next question was, in 2025, is it possible to go off the grid? And you're basically saying no.
Not really. I mean, maybe if you've got, 100 acres somewhere and you don't go in town to the general store, or if you do, they don't have internet and no cameras, and there's no cameras on. Because there is bound to be some internet connected device somewhere in your life. I mean, even so, I go to Pennsylvania a lot because my sons were up there for college, and even the Amish people, when they get in their buggy and they go to the farmer's market to sell their goods, they're going to pass by license plate readers.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to get, when they are selling their goods, they're going to get caught on camera. People are going to film them. I mean, it's hard to be off the grid, even for the Amish.
It feels like it's an almost impossible task to live the modern life without at some point slipping up and giving your data away to somebody, somewhere, somehow, whether it's the government, a private company in Silicon Valley, somebody's going to have the information. What are some ways that I can protect my privacy without sacrificing all of the modern conveniences?
We talked a little bit about the burner phone and burner emails. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I say things like, when you're on social media, post about where you were, not where you are. I know people want to share their vacation or graduation moments or whatever the amazing things are. And that's totally cool. I understand that. Do it after the fact, not in the moment. That can be really helpful. And here's another one to think of, because these get hacked. The security questions that you answer, don't put the real answers. Don't put stuff publicly available, and don't put the real answers. So for example, if it says like your mother's maiden name, well, unless you're talking to the IRS, don't give it to them.
Yeah.
Like, why would you give your mother's maiden name to Meta? They don't need it. So there's different people that make me think of my mom that's not my mother's name. And so I use their name.
I had never thought about lying on one of those.
It's not lying. It's your answer.
That's true.
It's your answer. So it's lying if you're filling out a government form or an employment form.
Well, yeah, but on like a security question.
But if it's Meta and they're asking, or Google, and they're asking you a security question, they're like, where did you go to high school? And you're like, Hogwarts, I don't know. Like, don't tell them stuff, because if somebody's trying to take over your account, they're going to look at all the publicly available information, and they're just going to keep trying until it's right. So favorite color, you can put in there dolphin. Like, you don't have to, you just have to make sure you can remember.
As long as you remember it,
As long as you can remember. But I mean, that's what password vaults are good for. Or if it says favorite color, think of your favorite thing. What is that color? So like if your favorite football team is the Eagles, that's so clear. It's green.
Yeah.
So you could say Eagles instead of green. So there's things that you can do to throw criminals off. And that's the thing I really want people to take away. And I think your podcast does such a good job at this. Criminals are not better than you. And when you are attacked, do not be ashamed if they are successful. These are really bad people, and this is their trade craft. So they got you. Okay, you're going to be okay. There's resources for you, whether you're a company or an individual. But the way we beat them is, 1, we share information and advice. 2, we report things when we see it. And 3, we outthink, we outdesign, and we outsmart them. So they're counting on you to answer those security questions with things that they can find. because they're counting on you to answer the question as designed, like you're a student in school.
Yeah.
But it's just social media.
I feel like I'm filling out I'm like rethinking every security question
You're
that
gonna
I've
change
ever
them all
put in.
tonight, aren't
I'm
you?
going to go home. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Because I never thought, I could just put something else. I don't have to tell them this information. It also feels like all of those questions are so, they're so not built for the world that we live in now.
They're not.
Because like your mother's maiden name maybe 40, 50 years ago, sure, probably a lot of people might not know that. But now it's like, my mom's maiden name is on Facebook. Like you wouldn't even have to follow her to see it. It's just there.
Or your high school, or your high school mascot, or all of these questions. You're like, for real?
Yeah.
So put something nonsensical.
That's genuinely probably the best piece of cybersecurity advice that I have gotten since
You're
I started working here. So
welcome.
thank you for that. I feel like now with all of this information that you've given me, I can go on the run. And
I'd love to see you try, and Lenny and I will see if we can
Okay, well,
find
hold on.
you.
Is that a challenge then?
Yeah, you need a new podcast.
We're gonna set it up.
You need a new podcast going off the grid. Let's do it.
We're setting it up.
We'll see.
If I went off
give you
the
a
grid,
head start.
I'm gonna have you call your shot now. Then, if I went off the grid and I tasked you and your team with finding me, how long do you think it would take? And we'll give you a radius of.
You're smarter than the average bear, so I would say as far as like how to get off the grid. So it might take us a week to find.
Okay. All right.
It might.
We might have to set this up. I feel like that would be a very, very interesting experiment, especially for
Let's
this
get some
channel.
sponsors. Let's go.
Yeah. Listen, we can do it. We can do it sure.
I'll even let you have a buddy.
Oh wow!
I don't want
really?
to be alone.
Who am I going to take? I've got cut to that angle. Nacho's raising his hand. I feel like Nacho would sell me out in a heartbeat. Honestly.
Well, that's the thing. Sometimes you.
That's a good point. Well, I do want to talk about Manipulated because, as I said at the top of this interview, I read it, I enjoyed it, and I also learned a ton, especially because working here, when I think about hacking, a lot of what we do is in the digital world, and it's very traditional in the sense that it's stolen password, it's breached account, but social engineering and manipulation is also a huge part of what we do because, P gets on the phone with the scammers and he pretends to be a victim and he engineers them into thinking that they're in a safe spot, then turns around and hacks them. So seeing how dangerous social manipulation can be when it's not being used in the hands of the good guys was really, really interesting to read about. Can you just explain really quickly for everybody, what is a manipulation campaign?
Yeah, so a manipulation campaign, it can be something, quote, good. So it can be a marketing team sees that you looked at a pair of shoes online and they suggest other shoes that look just like it that are a little less expensive. So now you go down the path and you go buy it. Some people call that marketing. I call that manipulation. I literally was thinking about light blue heels, did not even say the words out loud. I don't know how it happened, but suddenly my whole feed was filled with light blue heels, okay? So that's an example on sort of a nuanced, kind of nice level of being manipulated because it saves you some money. Fast forward to other manipulation campaigns can be you want to convince somebody to see your point of view. Mm-hmm. Get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated is sadly one of those hot button topics. And you have passionate people on both sides who architect manipulation campaigns. Now, sometimes the manipulation campaigns are all truthful. These are cheaper shoes than the ones you looked at. Sometimes they take a kernel of truth and then they wrap mistruth around it. So that is a disinformation campaign. Or they sort of have a leading headline hoping maybe you won't really look at the truth. So that's a misinformation campaign, but they're still manipulative. And then others try to get you to act. They try to get you to riot in the streets. They try to get you to hurt other people. They try to get you to not vote or to vote or whatever it is that's behind their motives. So it's sort of a modern day twist on propaganda.
Feels easier than ever to get in front of people with it too. Because everybody's on social media. You talk about in your book how there were Facebook pages created in Texas for two different groups of people. And actually, you know what? I'll let you explain that Because I think it's a great example of how easy it is to manipulate the average person.
Yeah, so they basically would, take pictures, post these pictures. They made it look like they were local. And then they would take different issues that were anti-Hillary Clinton, in this case, and they would basically say, she said this, the deplorables comment and things like that. And in Texas, we don't put up with that. So they would basically take things that were in the news, real headlines, and then they would post things about being Texans and how we're not going to stand for this. And they even got people to sign up for a rally, but the rally ended up being mostly peaceful. But people were actually at the rally trying to meet the organizers who, curiously, didn't show. But it really wasn't until later, after the dust settled and the election was over, that people realized this was a manipulation campaign and Russian operatives. It was literally the research of the FBI and others that figured that out. Real Texans thought they were real Texans that were moderating these groups. And thankfully, there was no bloodshed.
Yeah.
But they got people really riled up. And at the end of the day, it was Russian operatives behind these groups. And I think about today, so I did a second edition manipulated for 2024. Mm-hmm. But now that we're seeing Gen AI do translation so beautifully, now Russians could say, well, hey, here's what I want to do. Translate all this into American English, but do me one better. Have it be like Matthew McConaughey's talking to them. And then the next thing you know, it's very authentic, it's very local, it's very organic sounding. It's not Matthew. It's Russians using Gen AI to propagate this manipulation campaign.
How susceptible do you think the average person is to being manipulated online?
Oh, we all are. The reason why manipulation campaigns work is when we go online, we all walk around with confirmation bias. Some of it's conscious, some of it's unconscious. And so when you're presented with a manipulation campaign that kind of gets you here, not here, here, you kind of have this like, I knew it. And then you're ready to share it with everybody.
Yeah.
And see, that's how they literally know, like old propaganda campaigns, you drop flyers around out of planes, or you'd put up posters, or you'd go to parties and say things, or print things in sort of third-run newspapers. It took a long time to know if it worked. Now they know when you click and you repost and you click through and you like or you comment or whatever it is. They know instantaneously they got you. And that, to me, makes us all susceptible to it. We don't even know it's happening.
Who is launching these manipulation campaigns, and what do they want from us?
What's interesting is I was convinced when I set out to do the research for the first edition of the book, which is the one you have there, mm-hmm. I was convinced that a lot of the manipulation campaigns were, I either want you to agree with me on this issue, or I want to pick winners and losers in elections. So that was kind of my thesis going in. And I actually learned something that shocked me about manipulation campaigns is everyone makes loads of money, except for you and me. We end up manipulated, maybe not even speaking to each other again. Mm-hmm. But the social media platforms make lots of money. But the nation states that do this, they make lots of money. So almost anybody can do a manipulation campaign, and you make tons of money doing it, because every time you react and click or share or whatever, somebody's making money.
So it's not just to sow seeds of doubt into the minds of people. It's kind of a twofold thing. They're making money.
Yes.
And they're accomplishing a secondary goal.
Yes.
Which is basically screwing all of us over too at the same time.
You read the chapter on Hacker X.
Yeah.
I have a whole chapter dedicated to him.
That was so fascinating to me. Just for anybody that hasn't read the book, it's a American citizen, somebody stateside, that helped run a huge manipulation campaign that was very financially successful. When you interviewed
he never got found out.
And they don't even know what the campaign was, what the source of the manipulation was, do they?
So he shared some of it with me. Mm-hmm. So basically, he was given 3 directives by the people who hired him. Honestly, he thought he was going to an interview with the CIA. The way they reached out to him. was very clandestine. And he went into a room that had a desk and 3 chairs. It was just bare bones. So he thought, this is it. This is my moment. I'm going to work for the CIA.
Yeah.
And they were like, we want you to help us make sure Hillary doesn't get elected. We want you to make us loads of money. And you need to self-destruct button so we never get found out.
He did all 3 of those things.
He did all 3 of those things.
Are you at liberty to disclose what kind of money, how much money?
He never shared with me, but he said it was so much they wanted him to continue doing it, just picking different manipulation topics. And he just was, honestly, he said he was sick of it. Like it made him sick to his stomach what he had done.
Yeah.
It kind of turned him off to it. So he stepped away. He hit the self-destruct button on the operation and walked away.
How much money do you think is wrapped up in these manipulation campaigns?
Depends on how good they are.
Yeah.
In some cases, probably millions, tens of millions. It's hard to know how much the Russians are making, but you would see where Russia, North Korea, and Iran would be highly motivated, even though Iran's not as good at it, because they're under economic sanctions. You have to launder money somehow. So what's a Russian oligarch to do? If you need access to cash.
Yeah. And you said earlier they're testing these tactics on their own people before they even try to deploy them over here. What was the craziest manipulation campaign that you uncovered during your research for the book?
So in my interview of Hacker X, he had come across Macedonians. And you'd think, why would Macedonians have a manipulation campaign? That doesn't make any sense. And so he actually was able to broker a meeting with them, a conversation with them. And he asked them, why are you pro-Bernie, anti-Hillary, and pro-Trump? Like, I can't square the two, pro-Bernie and pro-Trump. Like, it doesn't go together for me. And they said, oh, we're just pro-capitalism. We're just pro-cash. And he said, what do you mean? They said, well, we started off being pro-Hillary, and we realized we weren't making as much money. So if we did anti-Hillary and pro-Bernie, that made us more money. But then when we layered in pro-Trump, that made us the most money. And he was like, what are you talking about? So they started sharing with him, how they thought about things by time of day of week, by geography, and then presenting people with what they wanted. But that kind of narrative in sort of these alternate news media sites that they created that look like news media. So they made it look like local news Florida, local news USA, local news Southeast, whatever. And people don't know. They're just searching for a topic. And then if you're good at search engine optimization, you see the topic, and then you cross-post it onto social media. So then you sort of create this virtuous cycle with ads. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it. Like the Macedonians literally were like, we want a piece of the action. And so they're manipulating Americans, not because they want us to be rioting in the streets. The Macedonians didn't want that. They just wanted to make loads of money.
Well, evidently it worked.
It worked.
And it seems like social media was such an easy breeding ground to get these things moving.
Yes.
How can I, when I'm on social media, know if I'm being manipulated, and how can I stop it?
Don't get your news from social media. So I always tell people, if you're seeing something in your feed and you have an extreme reaction about it, either like, aha, I always knew it, or this makes me mad, or this makes me sad, or this makes me super happy, you need to ask yourself, why do I feel that way? And chances are it's a manipulation campaign. So step away. And I always tell people, have 3 pre-vetted, trusted news sources. Try one that's international. And if you don't speak the language, just translate the language. Have one that's national, have one that's local. And ask yourself, what are they saying about this topic? Are they even talking about it? And that can be a great way to just prevent being manipulated.
I was on TikTok about a month ago, and this was post reading your book, and this was right after Trump announced all the tariffs, and everything was in chaos. And I remember opening TikTok in the days, like the 3 or 4 days following that, and I kept getting these videos of these factories in China explaining how they produce all of the products for American companies like Lululemon and, Coach and all these big luxury brands, right? And saying like, we will give you the product direct from the factory for X amount of money that is, way less. And I was watching those and I was like, man, they are feeding me this stuff for something for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interesting to see something like that happen in real time, where news in America of the tariffs and, the economy kind of going into a free fall for a little bit, then directly translated to the content that I was watching on my phone, where people literally on the other side of the world were like, we can help. Like, here's exactly the questions you're asking, we have the answers to already.
Well, here's the crazy thing. It might not have even been masterminded by a person at that level.
No.
So there may actually be where programs are written that say, take a US trending headline and then generate content. And you can generate the video, the audio, generate content, taking that headline and making people aware and take action. And Gen AI will do it. So you could literally have a bot that every day is just reading the headlines and generating videos for you. And who knows, like that once the engineers set it and forget it, and now you're being manipulated and the bot's just doing all the work at this point. Some things will hit and some things won't, but free, easy, and cheap for them to do it.
That was one of the things that struck me so much when I was reading it, your book, was the way that you discussed the advancement of AI technology. There was a specific part in there where you outlined this fictional scenario of a very hotly contested political race in a foreign country, and there being a debate that was moderated by a public figure. And a deep fake of that public figure came out right before the debate, and they had to address it on television, and it ultimately ended up ruining their reputation. And at the very end of that account, you say, this is fiction for now.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, a year ago, I think, I read a story in the news about a man named Eric Eiswert, American school principal,
Yes.
that was fired because there was AI audio of him, but they thought it was real.
Yes.
And he was saying all these awful racist things, and then it turned out to be a complete fabrication. And the worst part was going on social media and seeing that the fact that it was AI didn't make the rounds the way that the initial story did.
Correct.
So that guy's life was ostensibly ruined because of AI. When did you realize that AI was going to be dangerous?
Oh, many years ago. I love the power of AI to improve our lives. So I don't want people to think I'm anti-AI. But we got social media so wrong. We just sat here and talked about all the guardrails that are lacking in social media to prevent people from being defrauded, account takeovers. There's nowhere for victims to go. Romance. I mean, there's so many things that need to be handled much differently on social media than they are. And AI is just on another level of technology, and we just don't have the right guardrails in place for it. And so the dangers of AI are, we haven't really thought through not just the guardrails of how to protect us and the misuse of AI, but also the ethical challenges that AI presents. Just like in the Industrial Revolution, do we want to displace people? And what do they do next? And how do they get upskilled and how do they get trained? But also, do we want to lose the human in the loop?
Yeah.
Do we want everything to be automated? Or do we want a human in the loop who says, look, we're going to automate these things because it's super convenient for you.
Yeah.
Like at 2 a.m, if you got to get your access to your bank account and you forget your password and you want a password reset, you sure don't want to wait until 8 a.m. to get it reset.
Yeah.
That's technology serving you. But if you have a real issue, a real medical issue, and you want to talk to a human being, but you got to go through a AI teledoc before they'll let you get to a human being, I don't think we want that. Those guardrails are not there. We don't even have guardrails now that tell you when you're interacting on a website that you're dealing with an AI customer service chatbot named Sarah, but it's not Sarah. It's just the chatbot's named Sarah, but it's not a human.
Yeah.
They don't even disclose that. That should be disclosed. So it's a very perilous time. It's a very energizing time at the same time.
What do you think the most dangerous thing that AI could do in the future is?
Not allow us to do something.
Explain.
So in the name of like safety, you could have AI in the form of droids and security in a building and things like that, literally make a game time decision that nobody's allowed to exit the building when actually exiting the building is the right thing to do to save lives. Computers are not infallible, and computers will fail. And computers can get hacked, and AI will be hacked. The algorithms will be hacked. The data lakes they're trained on will be hacked. They hallucinate now. You know, I say to people, like, the AI we have today reminds me of like an 8-year-old doing a school project in the school library. And you're like, hey, see all those books over there? Get me the answer to this. And the first book that has something that's even maybe remotely the answer, they're going to write it down and they're going to bring it back to you because they want to please you. But it may not be the answer that's correct. And that's today's AI. But the more we start to just build it into everything, everybody's AI washing everything. Everything's got AI in it, really? And should we? And do we need it? So that is my concern, is sort of in the rush to like, hey, we could use AI to improve public safety. Okay, sounds great on paper. But what happens if either it's engineered incorrectly and it makes the wrong decision, or it gets hacked and we all, in the name of public safety, get locked in a building when really we should be exiting the building. And now we got no way to get out because there's no kill switch. Nobody knows how anything works. So that's just one example of many. I promise I'm really fun at parties. Although my husband will say, don't ask her anything about work. Or like, what are you seeing out there? He's like, don't ask her.
We're going to have a separate podcast just to talk about fun things and not the impending doom of the world because of artificial intelligence. You talk about needing guardrails for AI, but when it comes to regulation, where do you draw the line between protecting us and stifling scientific innovation?
That's a tough one. And I'm typically sort of government is slow and plodding and not always helpful. So like, be careful what you wish for with regulation.
Yeah.
But I do believe if we can come up with the right frameworks around safety and ethics and security and privacy for all technology, not just AI, like that privacy bill of rights I was talking about, then no matter what's hot and what's not, we would all be protected. And so that, to me, I think is the bigger thing. We need a more dynamic framework that says, we all have an individual right to privacy. So if you're collecting information about us, we have a right to know it. We have a right to optimize that. We have a right to erase it. We have a right to knowing what it is. And if you're monetizing it, we have a right to it. So all of those things, including copyrights. Think about artists right now. SAG-AFTRA, their strike, they did us all a favor because part of the strike was around, you can't just use my likeness and make a new song. You can't use my likeness and make a new movie. You can't use my likeness and, do something with it. Think about authors. What if somebody says, you know what, we're going to do a 3rd edition manipulated without Theresa. We're just going to have AI update it.
Yeah.
And that can all happen because we haven't spent the time thinking about, we had this kinetic world where we set up the ground rules and it wasn't perfect, but we have trademarks and patents and copyrights and we, when you deal with your bank or you deal with your healthcare organization, there's all these rules about how you're treated. Same thing with your phone. If somebody wants to snoop on your phone, they got to go to a judge, they got to get a warrant, they have to be in law enforcement and all of that stuff. Well, now somebody just installs spyware. So all of that in the kinetic sense, we've had hundreds of years to figure that out. We've had such a short time with technology and we have not kept up and we have not figured it out.
I find it difficult personally to imagine the government being able to effectively regulate the technology that we use. And I will say that most of my discomfort from that comes directly from watching the TikTok hearings from a few years back.
Yes.
And I'm sure that our elected officials across the country are very apt at doing their job and are experienced in many different realms. But there was such gross incompetence during that hearing that it genuinely made me ashamed, because I was like, how can I expect you to make this decision for me when you're asking, it was some of the most ridiculous questions. Who do you think the government can trust to bring in and teach people about the consequences of the technology we're using?
I look at other countries that are doing some really great work here. So for example, Finland, they do public service announcements targeted at every age group. And they teach digital citizenship in school. But most importantly, because I know in this country, everybody gets worried like, well, whose truth is it? Okay, stop with the politics, everybody. What they're doing is teaching critical thinking skills. Sort of back to am I conspiracy theorist? To me, I'm applying critical thinking skills. So just because you tell me something is so, I want to apply my critical thinking skills. I don't want you to think for me. And so we really need to do a better job in the United States with encouraging critical thinking and not saying, well, if you don't agree with me right away, then you're against me. No, I'm just trying to ask questions and seek different inputs. K through 12, we need critical thinking skills courses. We need digital citizenship, and we need public service announcements to help people. Just like we've had public service announcements in the past about it's good to stand up and move around, or it's good to save money for the future. This could be really helpful. It's almost like Schoolhouse Rock. It's like we need to bring it back, and we need to bring it back about, technology.
What's something that everybody should know about digital literacy? Something that will help them be safe online?
Once you produce something digitally, it's hard to make it go away. The only time I see like something really go away is like somebody doesn't have a backup of all their family photos and the one hard drive that everything's on crashed. Like I don't know why that's always the devastating chaos.
I was going to say, it's never a good thing that disappears. It's always the thing that
yes,
you want to keep,
it's like,
right?
This is the only thing I had and now it's gone. But in all seriousness, it is hard to make things, once they are digitally produced and stored somewhere, to make them go away. So once you create a record, it's hard to make it go away. Once you share the record, it's almost exponentially worse to make it go away. I can't tell you how many lives are ruined by either something fabricated. This is why the Take It Down Act that just got passed into law, and now we've got to have it basically codified so that it's in effect for social media companies. That's why that law is so important, because it's like playing whack-a-mole. Once something is shared, pulling it back is so hard.
Oh, yeah.
And this non-consensual illicit imagery, whether it's real pornography or deepfake generated, it's ruining people's lives. And, we have a female athlete, and somebody stole real kind of personal images. And this person every once in a while just pops up and just puts it all over the internet. And does it through third-party brokers. So it's hard to get at who it really is. And because the imagery was stolen so long ago, we tried to do an investigation, but there was not enough digital evidence to figure out who stole it to begin with. But they go through these third-party brokers, and they every time they do it, they ruin her life. Like, she doesn't want to leave her house. She's a professional athlete. So something like Take It Down, all she has to do, it's awful because she's going to be re-victimized again.
Yeah.
But now she actually has a straightforward remedy. So if she hears about it or somebody tells her about it and she reports it as the victim, they will have 48 hours to take it down, or they will be legally fined and penalized.
It's great that we finally have something like that. It's strange that it took so long to get there. When do you think the transition between these hackers going after notable people, such as a famous athlete, and just everyday random people took place? Because it seems like nobody's safe.
Nobody's safe. They go after everybody. And it's really to make a quick buck. It's also clickbait. So you stand up a fake news site, then you have ads, then you say you're never going to guess what so-and-so look like on the beach on their private vacation.
Yeah.
And then you have this deepfake imagery or things that are doctored up, and then people click on it because people click on train wrecks, basically.
Yeah.
And then they make money.
Can you explain real quick just what is a deepfake?
So deepfake technology in and of itself isn't a bad thing. So for example, you could use it to create training videos. Instead of making like the person, like your CEO, constantly do all these different videos, you could have the head of HR or CEO, and you could generate them.
Mm-hmm.
So it can be very helpful, the technology. You can use it in post-edit. Something's a little garbled, you can just fix it a little bit. But deepfakes can actually produce, based on prompts, videos, pictures, audio, that looks like the real thing.
How much has that technology advanced in the last 10 years?
Oh, I can't believe it. I do demonstrations for our clients all the time. We do digital disaster tabletop exercise playbooks for a lot of clients. And if they're game, a lot of times we'll ask the CEO if we can create a deep fake of them as part of the exercise.
Mm.
And in one, we said, can we do a choose your own adventure? So we had a real video of the exec. Then we created a deep fake with different instructions. And the team had a hard time figuring out which one was real, which one was fake. So that's tough. Their own team,
Yeah.
knowing one's real and one's fake, still had a hard time. That's how far it's come. I do demonstrations. I just did one yesterday for the credit union industry. And I did one of my voice, and then I did a video of me doing a real interview and a deepfake. And they couldn't tell which one was the real and the deepfake. They got it wrong. And I used a free tool. I used a basic MacBook. For the voice cloning, I used 20 seconds of my voice and then typed a script and had said something I'd never said. And then the videos were short, tiny clips. And again, all done on free tools.
That is so scary. Do you think we are trending towards the direction where we will not be able to tell at
Yes.
all?
Yes, absolutely. This is why I tell people you need a passphrase that when you're on the other end of the video call, the phone call, that is not easily guessed. Because you need to say, I know, I see it's you, but what is our passphrase? And it really works. I mean, we know of a couple instances where we've trained organizations to have that passphrase, and they think they've got the phone call authorizing the wire transfer, and they ask for the passphrase, and the line goes dead.
I think the scariest thing to me is that, I mean, if you took this technology and put it in the past, right, there would be a very limited amount of data on regular people.
Yes.
You need to get people that were in movies and that there was a lot of footage of. But you take somebody like me, or really anybody that works in this office, for example, our faces are all over the internet. I mean, so someone right now is watching a 2-hour-long interview with both of us. That's so much data to train on. And it's terrifying what they could do to just a regular person.
Yes.
So you mentioned having a passphrase so that when you're on the phone with someone, you can verify that you're talking to who you think you're talking to. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that you recommend to help people spot deep fakes?
I think slow down. So the one thing about criminals and fraudsters is they know our human nature. So they're just trying to get you to act fast so you don't think. So if somebody's asking you to move money around, that's the time to slow down. Anytime something involves your bank account, whoa, slow down. Or getting on a plane and flying somewhere, or getting in a car and driving somewhere. Because if you can slow down a little bit, most victims I talk to say to me, you know what, I had a red flag go off, but because I thought it was my grandson, I didn't pay attention to it.
Yeah.
So in that moment, if you can just calm down, and if you've got anybody around you even, say to them, just say to the person, oh, it's really noisy here. Hold on 1 second so I can tell people to quiet down. Then you say to the person who's with you, hey, can you do me a favor? Can you just call Sally and make sure they're okay while I keep this person? And then, again, verify and never trust. That's actually where we are right now.
Yeah.
unless you're in person with the person. And then one day we might have that Mission Impossible where, Tom Cruise puts other people's masks on and has their voice and everything, but we're not there yet, as far as I know, or as far as you know.
Why is the average person, me, expected to be the first line of defense when it comes to my own cybersecurity?
It's so frustrating. You shouldn't be.
Yeah.
I mean, you buy a smartphone, you buy a laptop, you buy a tablet. It's super expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Security should just be built in by design. It's not how we've thought about it traditionally. But, for example, I didn't get in the elevator in your building, but I know anywhere in America, I can go in the elevator and I can see, the certificate. It's been maintenanced and all that stuff. And I don't think to myself, after they built the building, I hope when they brought the elevator people in, they thought about security.
Yeah.
Because we've evolved our thinking on architecture. So architects by design are not just thinking about aesthetics. They're thinking about earthquakes and fires, and they're thinking about all the different building codes that we've all learned hard lessons on because buildings fell on people, elevators didn't work, electrical fires. So all of those things by design go into the first sketch of a building. So you've got the creativity going on, but in the back of everybody's mind, it's like, well, and of course it's going to be safe and it's going to be secure. You don't do that with technology.
What do you want to see happen with tech in regards to putting the person first and making sure that they are already protected?
We need to think about it like we think about building buildings. I mean, nobody says I'm going to build a building and later I'm going to bring the security people in to look at whether or not it'll stand. We wouldn't allow that. And when horrible things have happened, like happened in Miami when that building collapsed because it wasn't maintained properly, like there's a whole hot wash of it. There's a whodunit. We don't blame the people who live in it.
Yeah.
Right? We blame the people who were responsible for the building. But right now, we blame the victim of the cybercrime. They're like, what did you do wrong? Did you click on a link? Instead of saying, well, why is the technology allow you to click on a link that gets you in trouble?
Yeah.
So we have to change our thinking. Everything needs to be focused on the human user story. Why are you using the technology to begin with? And then it needs to be secure by design.
Are there any companies that you think are doing a good job heading in that direction right now?
I mean, there's a lot that goes into, obviously the bigger companies that have been around for a while now, Google, Apple, IBM, Microsoft, like they all know they're a target. So they have a lot of secure by design principles, but they also have some legacy pieces that aren't as secure. And it's tough because many of them are now publicly traded companies, so they're answering to shareholders. When you answer to shareholders, they don't always have like a 100-year view. They have a now view.
Yeah.
And so the question is are we trading off security and privacy in the name of shareholder returns? And so you end up being in sort of this vicious cycle where you're never fully caught up.
How do you feel about companies like Proton VPN and Signal going the nonprofit route in order to try and eliminate that aspect from their business?
Yes. Proton, I'm a big fan of the work that Proton is doing, Proton Mail, and they're trying to roll out enterprise applications. And especially now that AI is being integrated into everything, I have a lot of questions for all of big tech. Like, are you training your AI on my documents? On information that's in these documents?
Yeah.
Workflow in the back office? There's a lot of questions. And I have a lot of questions on, can I truly opt out if I don't see it?
Do you have any thoughts on Sam Altman, OpenAI, trying to transition over into a for-profit model? Obviously, he and Elon Musk got into it on X a little bit. Do you have any thoughts on that? I believe he's now backed down and said that they're no longer pursuing that.
Yeah, I thought all of that was quite unfortunate.
Yeah.
The people that had to leave, the firing of him and the people who had to leave. Obviously, there is a battle for the soul of OpenAI and what they're supposed to be. And I thought it was very unfortunate, sort of that path of, well, maybe we're not going to be nonprofit, we're going to be this. And I'll leave it to their board to make the decision in the end as to what's going to be best. But if I were advising them, I would say, keep your nonprofit status and the nonprofit work that you do. And then if you want a for-profit company, there's nothing wrong with standing up a for-profit company that says, this is who we are and this is what we're all about. And we're going to ask the nonprofit to do the research and to almost be governance and to hold us accountable. And this is what we're doing in our for-profit. But don't like switch horses midstream and say it's still the same, just different.
Try and convince everybody that you're on
Still the same race,
path.
just a different horse.
Oh,
it's okay.
Yeah. Well, Theresa, this has been a wonderful conversation.
Well, thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for being here. And I have just one more thing to ask you.
Okay.
We want to start a tradition with the end of this podcast where we ask our guests to give us a line that Pierogi has to incorporate when he's on the phone with a scammer. It can be funny. It can be difficult for him to say so that it makes it really tough. But we want you to give us something that he can say to a scammer when he's on the phone with them.
Oh, I love that. How about something to the effect of, have you ever thought about living your life analog?
I like that. Telling a scammer over the phone. Have you ever thought about getting rid of all your technology?
Yeah. Have you ever just thought about living your life analog, going off the grid, putting on a tinfoil hat? That's it.
I could already hear the scammer's response. Okay, sir. Could you just go ahead and click on the link? Theresa, thank you so much
Thanks
for being here.
Thanks for having me. Take care.